He walked in expecting luxury and respect, what anyone would expect from a high-end hotel. But the moment they saw his face, everything changed. Cold stares, a hesitant receptionist, then the words that made his blood run cold. "We don't serve people like you." Humiliation burned through him, but he said nothing. Not yet. Because what they didn't know, he wasn't just any guest. He was a billionaire, and he was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. What happens when the man they rejected comes back as their new owner? Stay tuned. For Elijah Carter, success wasn't handed to him, it was earned. Raised in a modest neighborhood, he fought for every opportunity, turning late nights and early mornings into a multi-million-dollar empire. Now a billionaire, he had everything: wealth, power, influence. But none of that mattered when he stepped into the Grand Lexington Hotel. Dressed in a sharp suit, he walked up to the front desk, the weight of his accomplishments behind him. He had stayed in five-star hotels around the world, yet something about the stiff glances from the staff felt off. A pause, a hushed whisper. Then, the receptionist's forced smile. Elijah didn't know it yet, but in just moments, his success, his status, none of it would matter. Elijah slid his black Amex card across the counter, expecting the usual swift service. Instead, the receptionist hesitated, her fingers barely brushing the card before pulling back. A tight, forced smile curled on her lips. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're fully booked." Elijah's brow furrowed. He had made a reservation, a VIP suite, which was confirmed. He glanced at the grand lobby, chandeliers casting a golden glow over empty check-in counters. A bellhop was idled by the luggage cart. The silence around him wasn't natural, it was intentional. "Fully booked?" he asked, keeping his voice even. The receptionist shifted. A manager, an older man with silver hair and a stiff posture, appeared beside her. He didn't look at the screen or check the reservation. He just looked at Elijah, judging, calculating. "Yes," the manager said, his tone clipped. "Hotel policy, we reserve the right to refuse service." Refuse service. The words cut through Elijah like ice. He had heard them before. Stories from his father, from history books, from court cases fought and won. But now here he was, standing in front of a man who saw his wealth, his tailored suit, his success, and still only saw his skin. Elijah exhaled slowly, choosing his next words carefully. "I booked the penthouse suite weeks ago. My assistant confirmed it this morning." A pause, a shift in the air. The receptionist glanced at the manager, her fingers twitching over the keyboard as if she wanted to check, to verify, but she didn't move. The manager's face remained blank. "Like I said, sir, we're fully booked." Elijah's jaw tightened. Around him, a few guests watched, curious, amused, indifferent. He could argue, demand to see the records, and pull up his confirmation email. But he knew how this would end. A scene, security, an escorted exit, a silent victory for the people behind that desk. He let the moment stretch, his heartbeat steady, his pulse calm. Then slowly he picked up his credit card, sliding it back into his wallet. "Understood," he said, voice cool. He turned, walking past the marble floors and glittering chandeliers, past the guests who would never know the weight of what just happened. But as he stepped out into the night air, one thought burned in his mind. This wasn't over. 2 weeks later, the Grand Lexington Hotel prepared for an exclusive event, an announcement that would change everything. The staff bustled around, straightening tablecloths, polishing glasses, oblivious to the storm about to hit. The manager, the same one who had turned Elijah away, stood near the front desk, smoothing his tie. He didn't notice the hush that spread through the room as the door swung open. Elijah Carter stepped inside. This time he wasn't a guest. He wasn't here to ask for a room. He wasn't here to be judged. He was here as the new owner. The room tensed, whispers rippling through the staff like a cold wind. The receptionist's face drained of color. The manager turned, confusion flickering across his features, until the realization set in. Elijah walked forward, his presence commanding. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to demand attention. He already had it. With a measured calm, he stepped to the front desk, the very place where he had been rejected, and placed his hands on the polished surface. "Let's talk about policy," he said, voice smooth as steel. The weight of his words crushed the silence. The very people who had dismissed him now stood before him, their futures in his hands. No raised voices, no arguments, just a simple, undeniable truth. They had refused him. Now he owned them. The news spread like wildfire. A black billionaire had bought out the very hotel that once turned him away. No raised voices, no arguments. Just a simple, undeniable truth. They had refused him. Now he owned them. The news spread like wildfire. A black billionaire had bought out the very hotel that once turned him away. Some called it poetic justice. Others called it a wake-up call. But for Elijah, it was never about revenge. It was about change. His first order of business? A complete overhaul. The old management was gone. In their place, a new team, one built on respect, diversity, and inclusion. Policies were rewritten. Training was implemented. And that front desk, the one where he was once denied service, he made sure no one else would ever experience that humiliation again. But the truth lingered. How many others had been turned away before him? How many people without wealth and power had walked out of those doors, heads down, dignity stripped, and with no way to fight back? Elijah knew his story was an exception. Not everyone gets the chance to buy their justice. And that was the real problem. So he didn't stop at one hotel. He expanded. He funded initiatives. He made it his mission to ensure that discrimination, hidden behind smiles and policies, had consequences. This wasn't just about a hotel. It was about a system that still exists. Because for every Elijah Carter who can afford to fight back, how many others are left with nothing but silence?